Look at all of these beautiful gameplay changes and welcome to Victoria 3 patch 1.2. And unlike a normal update video where we might use the developer's diary as our guide, this time we get to use gameplay because patch 1.2 is officially live. Of course, to get it, you'll have to navigate into the beta branch on Steam and download it manually. This is an opt-in patch, a few weeks ahead of its full official release. But in this video, we're going to jump in and take a look physically in the game at everything that's changed in Victoria 3's patch 1.2. Mind you, they haven't released the full official patch notes yet, citing that they'd like us to explore the game instead. So we will do a little bit of exploration in this video, but we'll also use the recent developer diary as our guide. With our YouTube housekeeping out of the way, let's jump straight in. And as I jumped into the map, actually, I noticed a few changes. Few new colours or lines on the map. Most notably, what struck me was down here, just below the Russian bear. You can see there are 3 states. Previously, territory that would have been colonised by Russia at the beginning of the game now takes a new light. 3 unrecognised powers, and you'll note that all of these have Russia as their overlord, and a GDP of somewhere between 50 and 115,000. So obviously fairly small states. However, this is a fairly significant shift to the map, considering there was basically nothing there before. If there are any more changes that you've found across the world that you'd like me to highlight that I've missed, let me know below. But those are the ones that struck me as soon as I loaded in. Dang it, now they've got me going to every corner of the globe, looking at little islands and going, were you always there? The first thing you might do when you jump into a game of Victoria 3 is head to the tech tree, thanks to that glowing red light bulb at the top. And as you can see, holy cow, things have changed. Back a few developer diaries ago, they talked about how the tech tree could be changing during their Game Fest. They were experimenting with different things, and they talked a little bit about this being one of them. And as you can see, they came through on their promises. Take a look across the tree. You'll notice it is slightly more condensed. We can see a lot more. And of course, inside of the individual technologies, you get a bit of feel as well. What it unlocks, what buildings it unlocks, what new production methods. And there's also some color coding going on down here as well. As you can see, different symbols and colors showing different industries and good types or production methods. The color coding itself, of course, is fairly simple. These grayed out ones I already have, the green yet to unlock, and the darkened ones I can't yet research. And of course, when I click one, the currently researched technology will turn a beautiful baby blue. I can then also add additional cues to the tech tree. Text to the queue, I should say. Finally, we can queue up additional things, so I can just run along here and add a whole load of things. And you can see that they show up the top here as well, for quick and easy, say, removal of something that might not be needed anymore. With lots of changes to the user interface and user experience coming through, the next thing that we should obviously look at is kind of the main substantial gameplay feature of the update, and that's everything around the investment pool. Here you can see on the Buildings tab, I get a direct look at the investment pool. You can see how much money is in it, how much it'll change week on week, and also importantly there you can see interventionism is allowing it to be funded and who is actually contributing to the pool. And currently I have lots of different industries adding their money into this pool. And then of course they, like me, will begin construction on different things. And if we move over to the construction queue, you can see that currently our capitalists are investing in furniture manufacturers in one of our territory, waiting for more funding to become available. Currently 34% of it is available, and that's of course coming from the investment pool. So you can see it here in action. You can also filter to just show private constructions once they're underway, or of course get rid of your public constructions. The key difference of course being that public is constructed by us as the player, private is constructed through the new investment pool, and our populations will do that all by themselves. Inside of the economic laws, of course, you can see that play out in full effect. Hovering over any one of them will show you that private construction allocation, or who can or can't be a part of the investment pool, is a big factor. Every single one of these laws now takes it into account. And if you want to drive more of a private economy, you might want to turn here. Alternatively, you could try the new cooperative ownership model, which favours farmers and shopkeepers and a bit of private construction allocation along the way. As you can see though, all of the laws have changed. Well worth playing around with this private investment pool, because your private industry could very well be so strong. In patch 1.2, we'll have to of course do a little bit of playtesting to just figure out exactly which one of these is most broken first. Navigating to our Trade Routes tab, this has changed a little bit as well in patch 1.2. We can now get a sortable list of all trade routes in the market, or get a view where they are grouped by country. All of the lists can be filtered to exclude any routes not owned by us as players, and the country grouping is especially useful when setting up embargoes or other things like trade agreements. You can see the filters provide a nice touch to nab through, in, and out of different trade routes. You can even get an indication of whether one will be embargoed or agreed, who it will be with, and the volume of goods moving across. Or we can look at only our trade routes and investigate them, and of course, dismiss them if we don't need them. It's a nice user interface overhaul, I would say, to the trade route panel, but of course it's not alone. There's plenty more where that came from. In the settings menu, they've also added rebindable keys, replacing their shortcut system with a new one that of course can allow us to leverage rebindable key options. Population needs, something else that the team has tackled a few times, has received another holy grail of a facelift. If you navigate to the population tab here over on the left, and if I collapse or drop down some of these, we'll ignore the beta issue there, you can see how much taxes they're paying as a proportion, what their needs are, and what their greatest need is across all of the different good types, as well as, of course, relying on the things that we've come to know and love, whether the price is good or cheap or expensive relative to the base value, that kind of thing. This is a wonderful quick overview of the kind of information that I like to access. There are some more changes to the accessibility of information coming up a little bit later in the video as well. It's nice to see this kind of thing coming through. And if you're after even more information, say about a certain group that might be, I don't know, investing heavily in your private economy, maybe the capitalists, well, of course you can click in and get a slightly reworked version of the information here as well. They not only had a go at changing the user interface, but also changed the pop-ups and tooltips that appear here to try and bring more important information to the front. Just another way that you can view it, but of course at a slightly different level if you'd like to target groups in a different way. Other changes both to the user interface and the economy start to show up when we look at different tabs such as the Buildings tab. Here they've added infrastructure, labour, and qualifications to the map list that's shown when we try to expand buildings. They've made some other changes as well to the structuring of this tab so that it's slightly easier to navigate to new tabs if you're opening multiple options and, say, moving through a supply chain. Overall, it should be slightly easier to work with this interface, and it also should show up slightly better on the map as well so that you can visualize exactly where and how you're going to place these buildings and what kind of returns they'll provide. And alongside being able to reset production methods across regions, allowing for slightly easier resets when, say, you capture territory or something along those lines, you'll also note that one of my favourite mods has been integrated into the game, the visual methods by Fun. Whenever we look over a method of production, you can now see a visualization of the good as well as it written down. Might not seem like a big thing to everybody, but if you're a visual person, seeing these little images like this makes a huge difference to how quickly you can make your decisions, and it also arguably cleans up the UI, and goodness knows, there's already a lot of information at our fingertips. Nice to have this one slightly stripped down. And you'll also notice a few quality of life visual improvements, such as, for example, the fact that our convoys are now present up here on this top bar. The top bar expansion mod, one of my favorite ones because of all the information that it gives up here. Well, now even more of that is available to us by default in the game. You'll also notice while we're here some other UI changes. I won't draw on every single one, but there are some new buttons and options up in the top right, for example, especially around the construction queue and music and things like that. The music player, by the way, a relatively new addition into Victoria 3. Maybe you might want to pick out the soundtrack that really hits it just for you. I'll let you play around with that yourself. I'm going to leave that here for the time being. While we're up the top at our toolbar, we should talk quickly about radicals and loyalists. In patch 1.2, Paradox have improved the way that radicals and loyalists are presented. And crucially here, we learn more about why they turn radical or loyal, who they are and which interest groups they belong to. Information regarding it has all been exposed in several new tooltip panels, including of course these ones up the top where we'll get a better breakdown of the interest groups and just who's involved, but also actually in the individual panels too. Navigating into, I don't know, let's say an interest group like Intelligentsia, and you'll see a slight change here, particularly around this top part of the tooltip, with more information being easily and readily presented to us. Hopefully this will help us keep our revolutions and loyal fan babies in line. We'll wait and see. They've also changed the map modes in Victoria 3, and I have to say this is one of the most beautiful and satisfying changes, albeit very simple. At the moment, I'm hovering over gross domestic product, and you can get a feel for how much money these territories are making, and for context, we could move to a different part of the world, hover over it again, and start to get a different feel for the areas that are especially wealthy and perhaps not so much. Of course, it's early days, but if we come back here, there are 3 new maps. The first one is literacy. You can really get a feel for the difference between nations hovering over this one. My goodness. The next one up, to put the map into perspective, is the standard of living map. Here again, this one tends to tell a pretty decisive story, no matter where you are in the world. And then last but not least, they've also added an infamy map as well, the final one on the list. Not, of course, next along the top here, that's your population. In order to generate some infamy, I probably need to go to war. And as I do, as I lean up to make, say, Portugal my puppet, I note that primary demand now stands out above the rest. This is a huge change. Let's say I want to conquer another state, maybe North Angola. I can now add that as a demand, and crucially, I can change it so that it becomes a primary demand. If you're unfamiliar, this is really important because if the AI decides to back down after the opening moves have been made and while a play is escalating, they only need to cede to you their primary demand. Well now, at the cost of adding a little bit more, you can add more primary demands. And that means, of course, as soon as the AI goes to run away with their tail between their legs, you can force all of your primary demands on them now. No more running and hiding for anybody, and no more being peace-locked for 5 years to try and get that one territory because it wasn't your primary demand. As I prepare for the war, of course, other changes afoot, I could right-click on a territory, let's say this one right nearby, and I could then designate it as my strategic objective, one of my own states, or a state in the enemy theatre. When a general is advancing into this front, in which the enemy theatre contains a strategic objective, he will be more likely to advance towards it. So ideally here, of course, I want to have a strategic objective in their heartland. It wants to really be my core target territory. Once we start fighting and borders shift and move, it may get easier still. At the moment, maybe not useful for me, but this is a big change overall, because this is a way to add player agency into Victoria 3. A way, if you like, of sending your generals or armies towards a specific territory or objective, a way to beeline and blitzkrieg your way to a key point. We'll come back to this just slightly later in the video. If I navigate down to the diplomatic lens as war begins to inflame the continent, it also reminds me there are changes around the user interface down here, diplomatic plays, and AI acceptance. Let's say I want to, for example, send out a, protectorate claim. Now you can see on this information tab here, I get a real feel for why it is that they don't want to accept. Naturally, no one wants to, but you can also see other things here like the cost, status, and of course we can just fang out a whole load of these and send them far and wide. It's also quite nice now on the interactions tab, you can see all of the different interactions that you could have with a nation, regardless of whether they are necessarily locked or unlocked right now, by scrolling down to the bottom. All kinds of unavailable plays, for example, plays targeting states in Austria, plays targeting Austria itself. It's nice just to see all of the different things that could be available to you in a future campaign, or maybe once you've grown up to be a major power. Back to the military changes, and with my units amassing on a front line, I now choose to, let's say, set this coastal territory as my strategic objective. That should, hopefully, help the AI fight their way out to the coastline. The military itself, by the way, received a host of user experience improvements in patch 1.2. They tried to make it a little bit clearer or more obvious around how battle systems work. This was done specifically by exposing more data inside of the battles themselves. So, ooh, arrow animations. For our strategic objective, perhaps. There it is, baby. Fantastic. Alongside of these exchanges, like I say, they've added more information in the actual battle tabs themselves. Here they've added progress tooltips, breakdowns for the individual number of troops each general has brought into the battle, and also surfaced information regarding which headquarters a commander commissions from their home HQ. Sorry, which one they consider to be home, and they've also made improvements to the information presented in the naval invasion user flow as well. These somewhat minor relative to the overall changes in the update, but important to note that they have changed that alongside the big diplomatic plays that we've already discussed. And while you're not at war, and last but certainly not least, as this information does matter through most playthroughs, if you navigate to the Outliner tab on the left-hand side, you'll see that they've made some changes. Goods and non-military characters are the biggest additions here as new pinnable functions to put over on the right-hand side of our screen. You can see that the interest groups are now showing their approval value, and states show their available labour or qualifications, by the way, but also I've decided to pin, say, staple goods, and now I can immediately look over to the right-hand side of my screen and see all of that glorious information, and specifically the kind of things that I might want to start building now before my people get too, I don't know, radical with me. And that concludes today's patch update video for Victoria 3 version 1.2.